A patient once told me, "Doctor, I've been searching for happiness my whole life." I asked him, "What were you doing when you told me that?" He said, "Just talking to you." I smiled. "Were you unhappy in that moment?" He paused. "No, actually, I felt peaceful." That's when it hit him. He'd been so busy chasing happiness, he missed the fact that peace was already there. Your mind is not your friend. It's a survival machine stuck in the Stone Age, treating every email like a saber-toothed tiger. It's designed to keep you alive, not happy, not fulfilled, not free. The thoughts you think are you are just outdated software running on autopilot. But you, the real you, you're the awareness watching those thoughts. And that changes everything. Before we dive deep into this, if these ideas are resonating with you, consider subscribing and dropping a comment with what city and time zone you're watching from. I'm genuinely curious where this message is reaching people around the world. Today, I'm going to show you how to become the master of your mind instead of its slave. You'll learn why your thoughts feel so real and urgent, how your brain tricks you into suffering, and most importantly, how to step back and see it all clearly. I know what it's like to feel trapped by your own thoughts. That constant mental chatter that never stops. The voice that tells you you're not good enough, that disaster is around the corner, that you should have done things differently. You wake up already exhausted from the conversation in your head. You go to bed replaying the same worries over and over. It's like being stuck in a room with someone who never stops talking, and that someone is you. But here's what most people don't realize. You're not actually trapped. You just don't know you have the key. And I'm going to show you exactly where to find it. I've spent decades studying the brain, both its incredible capabilities and its predictable patterns. I've examined thousands of neural scans, published papers on consciousness, and worked with patients whose minds were literally falling apart from disease. But more than the science, I've learned this through my own journey, from mental prisoner to observer. I'm not here to impress you with credentials. I'm here to share what actually works. Most people live their entire lives, never realizing they're not their thoughts. They get trapped in mental loops, fighting battles that exist only in their heads. They spend their days wrestling with an invisible enemy that feels completely real but is nothing more than patterns of electrical activity in their brain. But what if you could step back and watch your mind like you watch clouds passing by? What if you could find peace, not by changing your thoughts, but by changing your relationship to them? The pain you're experiencing right now, that anxiety that keeps you up at night, that depression that makes everything feel gray, that constant worry about what others think of you, that feeling that you're somehow failing at life, none of it is caused by your circumstances. It's caused by believing the story your mind tells you about your circumstances. And here's the thing that will blow your mind. You can change that story anytime you want. You see, most people think they need to change their life to feel better. They think they need more money, a better relationship, a different job, a perfect body, more achievements, external validation. But I'm going to show you something that will save you years of chasing things that won't actually make you happy. The problem isn't your life. The problem is the lens through which you're viewing your life. And that lens, that's completely under your control. Think about it this way. Two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different reactions. One person gets stuck in traffic and uses it as evidence that the universe is against them, that their day is ruined, that they're a victim of forces beyond their control. Another person gets stuck in the same traffic and sees it as an opportunity to listen to music, to practice patience, to simply be present with what is, rather than fighting what can't be changed. Same traffic, same delay, same external circumstances, but completely different internal experiences. Why? Because they're using different lenses, different stories, different interpretations of what's happening. And here's the beautiful truth. You get to choose your lens. Let me tell you about the moment everything changed for me. It was a Tuesday evening in November, and I was sitting in my office after what had been one of the most difficult days of my career. I'd lost a patient, someone I'd grown close to over months of treatment. Her name was Margaret, and she reminded me so much of my grandmother. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special, even while battling a brain tumor that we both knew was going to win. Margaret was 73 years old, a retired teacher who still carried candy in her purse for her grown grandchildren. She would ask about my family during every appointment, remember details from our previous conversations, and somehow make me feel like I was the most important person in the world during our brief time together. She had this laugh that could fill an entire room, and even facing terminal illness, she maintained this incredible grace and humor that left me in awe. The day she died, her family had gathered around her bed, and I was there when she took her last breath. It was peaceful, dignified, surrounded by love, everything you could hope for in such a moment. But afterward, when I returned to my office to complete the paperwork and process what had happened, my mind began its familiar assault. The voice in my head was relentless. You should have caught it sooner. You're not as good as people think. You let her down. You let her family down. Maybe if you'd ordered different tests 6 months ago. Maybe if you'd referred her to that specialist in Boston earlier. Maybe if you'd been smarter, better, more careful, more intuitive. Maybe if you'd pushed harder for that experimental treatment. Maybe if you'd been more aggressive with the radiation protocol. The spiral went deeper and deeper. I started questioning everything: my competence, my career choice, whether I had any business trying to help people when I couldn't even help Margaret. I began replaying every conversation we'd had, looking for signs I might have missed, decisions I could have made differently. The thoughts came faster and faster, each one more painful than the last. Other doctors would have saved her. You're a fraud. You've been fooling everyone, including yourself. How many other patients have suffered because of your limitations? How many families have you disappointed? How many people have trusted you with their lives when you're clearly not up to the task? It was like being in a courtroom where I was simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the judge, and the verdict was always guilty. The evidence was always insufficient, the defense was always inadequate, and the sentence was always the same: you're not enough. But then something extraordinary happened. In the middle of this mental storm, I suddenly noticed something that changed everything. There was a part of me that was watching all of this happen, a part that was calm, still, observing the chaos like someone watching a movie from a comfortable seat in a theater. I realized there were two things happening simultaneously: the storm of thoughts and emotions, and this quiet awareness that was simply watching. It was like suddenly stepping outside during a thunderstorm and realizing you'd been safe inside a house the whole time. The storm was real, the rain was real, the thunder was real, but I wasn't actually getting wet. I was protected by something much larger and more stable than the weather. That's when it hit me, like a lightning bolt of clarity. The voice that was beating me up, that wasn't me. That was just my mind doing what minds do. Trying to solve problems, avoid danger, make sense of tragedy, protect me from future pain by rehearsing past regrets. But the real me? The real me was the one watching it all happen. The real me was the awareness that could observe thoughts without being consumed by them, feel emotions without being destroyed by them, experience pain without being defined by it. It was like suddenly realizing I'd been watching a horror movie and mistaking it for real life. The movie was still playing, the thoughts were still thinking themselves, the emotions were still flowing through, but I remembered I was just the observer in the theater seat. I could choose to keep watching the scary parts, or I could choose to step outside for some fresh air. I could get lost in the drama, or I could remember it was just a story. Think about it this way. Right now, as you listen to my voice, Thoughts are probably popping up in your head. Maybe you're thinking, this makes sense. Or, I'm not sure about this. Or, what should I have for dinner? Or, I wonder if this will actually help me. Or, this guy talks too much. Or, I need to call my mom later. Now here's the million-dollar question that will change your life. Who's the one noticing those thoughts? Who's aware that thinking is happening? That's you, the real you. Not the thoughts, the one watching the thoughts. Not the movie, the one in the theater seat. Not the weather, the sky in which the weather happens. Not the waves, the ocean in which they rise and fall. This changed everything for me. I went from being the victim of my mind to being its compassionate observer, and that made all the difference in the world. Suddenly, the same thoughts that had been torturing me became just phenomena to observe with curiosity. The same emotions that had been overwhelming me became information to consider rather than orders to obey. Margaret's death was still heartbreaking. I still felt grief, still wished things could have been different, still missed her laugh and her kindness. But I no longer had to carry the additional burden of my mind's story about what her death meant about me as a doctor, as a person, as someone worthy of trust and respect. I could honor her memory and feel the natural sadness of loss without torturing myself with thoughts of inadequacy. But here's what I wish someone had told me decades earlier. What I wish they'd taught in medical school alongside all the anatomy and pharmacology and diagnostic procedures. Your mind has been lying to you your whole life. Not maliciously, it's actually trying to help in its own confused way. But it's been telling you 3 enormous lies that keep you trapped in unnecessary suffering. Understanding these lies will set you free. But first, you need to see them clearly, because they're so deeply embedded in how we think about ourselves that we rarely question them. They're like the water a fish swims in, so fundamental to our experience that they're invisible. The first lie your mind tells you is this: you are what you think. Your mind has convinced you that every thought that pops up is somehow you. It's made you believe that you're responsible for every random idea that floats through your consciousness, that you should be judged by every fleeting emotion that passes by, that your worth as a person is determined by the quality and content of your mental activity. But think about this for a second. Where do thoughts come from? Did you decide to think your last thought? Did you plan it, design it, create it with intention and purpose? Did you sit down this morning and say, now I'm going to think about what I had for breakfast? Or let me deliberately worry about that thing I can't control? Of course not. Thoughts just appear, like bubbles rising to the surface of water. They emerge from somewhere you can't see, and they disappear to somewhere you can't follow. They're not you, any more than the sound of traffic outside your window is you. They're not you any more than the clouds passing overhead are the sky. They're not you any more than the waves on the ocean are the ocean itself. They're just events happening in the space of your awareness. You wouldn't identify with the sounds around you. You don't say, I am that car horn, or I am that dog barking, or I am that airplane flying overhead. So why do you identify with the thoughts in your head? The average person has about 60,000 thoughts per day. That's more than 1 thought per second during waking hours. If you were truly responsible for creating and managing all of those, when would you have time to do anything else? When would you sleep, eat, work, love, live? The truth is, most thoughts are just recycled material old fears, familiar worries, habitual patterns playing on repeat. They're like a radio that's been left on in the background, cycling through the same songs over and over. You don't have to turn up the volume just because it's making noise. You don't have to dance to every song that plays. You don't have to believe every advertisement that comes on. You can simply acknowledge that there's music playing and go about your business. I had a patient named Sarah who perfectly illustrated this first lie. She was a brilliant software engineer, incredibly successful in her career, but she was tormented by what she called her negative thoughts. She would come to my office in tears, saying things like, "I'm such a terrible person. I have these awful thoughts about people I care about. Sometimes I think mean things about my own children. What kind of mother thinks her kids are annoying? I must be broken, damaged, evil." Sarah was convinced that having these thoughts made her a bad person. She was identifying so completely with every random mental event that she was living in. Constant shame and self-judgment. She was trying to control her thoughts, to only think good thoughts, to be the kind of person who never had a critical or impatient or frustrated mental reaction to anything. It was exhausting her. She was spending more energy trying to manage her thoughts than she was actually living her life. She was like someone trying to control the weather by standing outside with an umbrella, getting more and more frustrated that the rain kept falling despite her best efforts. When I helped her understand that thoughts are just neural activity, not character judgments, everything changed for her. She realized that having the thought, "My kids are being annoying right now," didn't make her a bad mother any more than having the thought, "I could really go for some chocolate," made her a chocolate addict. Thoughts are just things that happen in minds. They're not moral statements about who you are. This understanding freed her to be human. She could acknowledge when her children were indeed being challenging without adding a layer of guilt about acknowledging it. She could notice critical thoughts without making them mean something terrible about her character. She could observe her mental activity with the same neutrality she might observe the weather. The second lie your mind tells you is that your thoughts are true. Your mind takes every random thought and presents it as breaking news from the Department of Absolute Reality. It says, "I'm not good enough," and you believe it like it's a medical diagnosis confirmed by multiple specialists. It says, "Something bad is going to happen," and you prepare for disaster like you've received a weather report from the most reliable meteorologist in the world. It says, "Everyone is judging me," and you hide like you've been issued a warrant for your arrest. But here's the thing that will set you free. Most of our thoughts are just stories, old patterns repeating, fears from the past projecting into the future, interpretations based on incomplete information, assumptions based on limited perspective. They feel true because they're familiar, but familiar isn't the same as accurate. Your mind is like an over-enthusiastic news reporter who's been given very little actual information, but still needs to file a story every few seconds. So it fills in the gaps with speculation, makes connections that may not exist, and presents everything with the same urgency, whether it's reporting on a genuine emergency or just the fact that you're out of milk. Let me give you a detailed example. You walk into a coffee shop and see two coworkers sitting together. They're talking quietly, and when they notice you, they stop their conversation and smile. Your mind immediately creates an elaborate story. They were talking about me. They probably think I'm incompetent after that presentation last week. They're being fake nice because they feel sorry for me. Everyone in the office probably knows I'm struggling. I bet they're wondering how I even got this job. They probably think I'm going to get fired soon. Within seconds, you feel hurt, embarrassed, paranoid, and want to leave. Your heart rate increases, your palms get sweaty, you start planning what you'll say to defend yourself if anyone confronts you about your performance. You might even avoid those coworkers for the next few days, which then creates more awkwardness and seems to confirm your original suspicion that something was wrong. But what actually happened? Two people stopped talking and smiled at you. That's it. That's the only factual information available. Everything else, the story about what they were discussing, their motivations, their opinions of you, their secret knowledge about your job security, that's all fiction, created by your mind in the span of about 3 seconds. But you believe the fiction more than the facts, because the mind is incredibly convincing when it tells stories. It doesn't present thoughts as possibilities or maybes or one interpretation among many. It presents them as reality, as truth, as things you need to take seriously and respond to immediately. I worked with a man named Robert who was trapped by this second lie in a particularly painful way. He was convinced that his wife was going to leave him, not because she'd said anything about leaving, not because their relationship was particularly troubled, but because his mind kept producing thoughts about abandonment and rejection. She was quiet during dinner last night, he would tell me. She must be planning her exit strategy. When she said she was tired and went to bed early, she was probably just avoiding me because she's fallen out of love. When she didn't text me back immediately this morning, she was probably talking to a lawyer. When she said we need to budget more carefully, she was probably preparing to split our assets. Robert was living in a completely different reality than his wife. She was thinking about normal life, things, work, stress, family obligations, household management, while he was constructing an elaborate narrative about the end of their marriage based on the most ordinary interactions. The tragic part was that his behavior, driven by these unfounded fears, was actually creating problems in their relationship. He became clingy, suspicious, constantly seeking reassurance. He would analyze every word she said for hidden meaning, every facial expression for signs of dissatisfaction. He turned normal conversations into interrogations and simple interactions into tests of her love. When he learned to recognize that thoughts are not facts, that his mind was just telling stories based on old wounds and fears, rather than current reality, he was able to step back and see his wife clearly for the first time in months. She wasn't planning to leave, she was just being a normal person, living a normal life. His thoughts about abandonment were just thoughts, not prophecies, insights, or reliable information about the future. This brings us to the third lie, which might be the most damaging of all, that you must act on every thought that arises. Your mind whispers, "Send that angry text," and you reach for your phone. It says, "You can't handle this challenge," and you avoid the opportunity. It screams, "Worry about everything that could go wrong," and you spend your day rehearsing disasters that will probably never happen. It suggests, "You should check your ex's social media," and you find yourself scrolling through photos that make you feel terrible. But you don't have to obey every thought, any more than you have to obey every commercial on television. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean it deserves your attention, your energy, or your action. Thoughts are like suggestions from an over-enthusiastic intern, sometimes helpful, often irrelevant, occasionally completely counterproductive. Think about it. If someone followed you around all day, making random suggestions, "You should eat ice cream for breakfast. You should quit your job. You should worry about that thing that might happen next year. You should assume everyone dislikes you. You should check your email again. You should compare yourself to that person on Instagram." You would probably tell them to be quiet and leave you alone. But when your mind makes these same suggestions, you often treat them as commands you're obligated to follow. I had a patient named Lisa who was completely enslaved by this third lie. She was what you might call a thought obeyer. Every mental suggestion, no matter how small or illogical, felt like something she had to act on immediately. If her mind said, "Check your phone," she checked her phone, even if she just looked at it 30 seconds earlier. If it said, "Worry about your daughter's safety," she would call her adult daughter multiple times a day to make sure she was okay. If it suggested, "Maybe you have cancer," she would spend hours researching symptoms online and make unnecessary doctor appointments. If it whispered, "You should clean the house," she would drop whatever she was doing and start cleaning, even if she was exhausted and had more important things to do. Lisa was living her entire life in reaction to random mental activity. She had no sense of choice, no ability to prioritize, no peace. She was like a puppet being controlled by an invisible puppeteer, except the puppeteer was her own mind, and she didn't realize she could cut the strings. When she learned that thoughts are just mental events, not marching orders, her life transformed completely. She discovered she could have the thought, I should worry about everything and choose not to worry. She could have the thought, I need to check my phone, and decide to finish what she was doing first. She could have the thought something bad might happen and respond with, that's an interesting thought, but I'm going to focus on what's actually happening right now. For the first time in years, she felt like she was driving her own life instead of being driven by it. Once I understood these three lies, I started to see them everywhere. In my patients, in my friends, in my family, in myself. We're all walking around believing we are our thoughts, that our thoughts are true, and that we have no choice but to follow them wherever they lead. It's like being hypnotized by our own minds, trapped in a trance we don't even realize we're in. But here's the beautiful thing. You can wake up from this hypnosis anytime you want, and I'm going to show you exactly how. Let me share another story that illustrates this perfectly. I had a patient named David, a successful businessman, who came to me feeling completely trapped by his own success. He had everything he thought. He wanted money, recognition, a beautiful family, respect from his peers, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was living someone else's life. Every day I wake up, the voice in my head starts immediately, he told me during our first session. His hands were shaking slightly as he spoke, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Before my feet even hit the floor, it's already going. You're behind schedule. You're not doing enough. Everyone expects more from you. You're going to disappoint people. You should be further along by now. Your competitors are gaining on you. You're not as smart as people think. What if they find out you're just making it up as you go along? David described what so many high achievers experience being at war with their own minds. The same drive and ambition that had made him successful had also become a prison. His mind had learned to motivate him through fear and criticism, and now he couldn't turn it off. By the time I get to work, I'm already exhausted from arguing with myself, he continued. I spend all day trying to prove to that voice that I'm good enough, smart enough, working hard enough, but nothing is ever sufficient. I close a big deal, and the voice says, that was luck, you'll never repeat it. I get praised by my boss, and the voice says, if he really knew you, he wouldn't be impressed. I make more money than I ever dreamed of, and the voice says, it won't last. You'll lose it all, because you don't deserve it. David told me about lying awake at 3 a.m, his mind churning through everything he had to do, everything he'd done wrong, everything that could go wrong. He described the constant feeling that he was performing his life rather than living it. Always on stage, always being judged by an audience that was never satisfied. I have everything I ever wanted, he said, his voice cracking slightly. But I feel like I'm drowning in my own head. I can't turn it off. I can't find peace anywhere. My wife says I'm always somewhere else, even when I'm physically present. My kids are growing up, and I'm missing it because I'm so caught up in whatever crisis my mind is manufacturing. I'm successful on paper, but miserable in reality. I asked him the same question I asked you earlier. You said the voice in your head is talking. Who's listening to it? He looked at me like I'd just asked him to solve quantum physics. What do you mean? You told me there's a voice in your head that starts talking the moment you wake up. If there's a voice talking, someone must be hearing it. Who is that? He sat quietly for a moment, really thinking about it. I could see something shifting in his eyes, like a light slowly turning on in a dark room. Then his eyebrows raised with genuine surprise. I'm the one listening to it. Exactly. So if you can hear the voice, you must be separate from it. You can't be both the speaker and the listener simultaneously. You're not the voice, you're the one who hears it. That simple question began to crack open everything for David. It was like showing someone who thought they were trapped in a locked room that the door had been open the whole time. Over the following weeks, instead of fighting with his thoughts or believing them automatically, he started to simply notice them with curiosity. Oh, There's that "you're not good enough" thought again. Look at that. My mind is rehearsing tomorrow's presentation for the 15th time today. Isn't that interesting, how my brain always jumps to worst-case scenarios when I have a big meeting coming up? He began to relate to his thoughts the way you might relate to an overprotective parent, sometimes annoying, often repetitive, but ultimately just trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how. He stopped taking every thought so personally and started recognizing them as just patterns his mind had developed over years of trying to help him succeed. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The same thoughts were still there. His mind didn't suddenly become zen and peaceful, but they had lost their power over him. They became background noise instead of breaking news. He was no longer their prisoner. He had become their compassionate witness. It's the strangest thing, he told me months later, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. I'm the same person, with the same mind, but everything feels different. The voice in my head still chatters away, probably always will, but it doesn't run my life anymore. It's like I used to live in a tiny, cramped room with no windows, and now I realize I actually live in a mansion with beautiful views. The room is still there. I can visit it when I need to problem solve or plan, but it's just one small part of this much bigger, more beautiful space. David had discovered what I want you to discover. You are not the tiny room of your thinking mind. You are the vast mansion of awareness itself. The thoughts are still there, but you've found the space, the awareness that was always there, waiting for you to come home to it. But David's transformation didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen just through understanding these concepts intellectually. It happened through practice, through gradually building the muscle of awareness, through repeatedly choosing to step back from the mental drama and remember who he really was. This is what I want you to understand at the deepest level. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes them. You are not the weather. You are the sky. Storms may pass through, but they don't define you. They don't control you. They don't diminish you. They're just temporary visitors in the vast, unchanging space of your being. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds beautiful, Walter, but how do I actually do this? How do I become this observer you're talking about? I've been identified with my thoughts for so long, I don't even know where to begin. And what if my problems are more serious than just having too many thoughts? What if I have real anxiety, real depression, real trauma? Let me be clear about something important. I'm not suggesting that mental health issues aren't real or that you can just think your way out of clinical depression or severe anxiety. What I'm sharing with you is a fundamental shift in perspective that can be helpful for anyone, regardless of their mental health status. Whether you're dealing with everyday stress or clinical conditions, learning to observe your thoughts rather than being controlled by them is a valuable skill. Let me show you exactly how to start. I'm going to give you 3 simple practices that will begin to shift you from being the victim of your thoughts to being their compassionate witness. These aren't complicated meditation techniques or esoteric spiritual practices. They're simple, practical tools that you can start using immediately. The first practice is what I call the 3-second pause. It's incredibly simple but remarkably powerful. The next time you notice you're caught up in a storm of thinking, maybe you're worried about something, angry about something, replaying an old conversation, or just spinning in familiar mental loops, try this. Notice what's happening. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. Then consciously choose your next response. Notice, breathe, choose. That's it. But don't underestimate the power of these 3 seconds. In that brief pause, you step out of automatic mode and into conscious choice. You move from being the victim of your mental weather to being the sky that contains it all. You remember that you have options, that you're not just a prisoner of whatever thoughts happen to be running through your head. Let me give you a concrete example that most people can relate to. Let's say you're stuck in traffic, and your mind starts going crazy. with its usual traffic commentary. This is terrible. I'm going to be late. Why does this always happen to me? I should have left earlier. What if I miss my meeting? People are going to think I'm unreliable. This city's traffic is impossible. Why didn't I take the other route? I hate this commute. My life is so stressful, nothing ever goes smoothly. The old you, the you that's identified with your thoughts, would get swept away by this story, feeling your stress levels rise, your jaw clench, your shoulders tense, your whole body preparing for battle, as if being late to one meeting was going to ruin your entire life. You'd arrive at your destination already exhausted and irritated, carrying that negative energy into whatever you were supposed to do next, possibly affecting your performance and your interactions with other people. But the new you, the aware you, catches this mental spiral and applies the 3-second pause. You notice, oh, I'm having those traffic is ruining my life thoughts again. My mind is catastrophizing about being 5 minutes late. Look at how my body is tensing up in response to this story my brain is telling. You take 3 deep breaths, feeling your body soften slightly with each exhale, remembering that you're not actually in danger just because you're moving slowly in your car. Then you consciously choose your response. This is just traffic. It's not a personal attack on me by the universe. It's not evidence that my life is falling apart. I can use this time to listen to music, practice breathing, call someone I love, or simply be present with what's actually happening right now, instead of the story my mind is telling about what's happening. Same traffic jam, completely different experience. Same external situation, but you've changed the lens through which you're viewing it. You've remembered that you're not the victim of circumstances. You're the one who chooses how to interpret and respond to circumstances. That's the power of the pause. It creates space between stimulus and response, between what happens and what you do about what happens. And in that space, you find your freedom. The second practice is becoming what I call the friendly observer. Instead of judging your thoughts or trying to push them away, which never works anyway, and usually makes them stronger, treat them with the gentle curiosity of a scientist studying something interesting. When a thought appears, instead of, I shouldn't be thinking this, or this thought is stupid, or why can't I stop worrying? Try, isn't that interesting? My mind is concerned about the future right now. Or, look at that. My brain is replaying yesterday's conversation again. Or, how curious that my mind keeps going to worst-case scenarios. This shift, from judgment to curiosity, changes everything. You stop fighting with your thoughts and start learning from them. You realize they're just patterns, habits your mind has developed over time to try to keep you safe. And like any habit, they can be observed, understood, and gradually changed. Think of it this way. If you saw a small child having a tantrum, you wouldn't get angry at them or try to force them to stop crying. You'd recognize they're overwhelmed and probably need some comfort and understanding. Your thoughts are often like that child. They're just trying to get your attention because they're worried about something. When you respond with kindness instead of resistance, they naturally begin to settle. I had a patient named Emma who was plagued by anxious thoughts about her health. Every small ache or pain would trigger a cascade of worry. What if this headache is a brain tumor? What if this chest tightness is a heart attack? What if I'm sick and don't know it? What if the doctors miss something important? What if I die young like my father did? She was spending hours every day on medical websites, convinced she had various terrible diseases, making unnecessary doctor appointments, getting expensive tests that always came back normal. Her family was frustrated with her, telling her she was being irrational, that she needed to just stop worrying. But the D2 said, more they dismissed her fears, the more alone and crazy she felt, which actually made the anxiety worse. When she learned to be the friendly observer, everything changed. Instead of getting caught up in the anxiety or trying to suppress it, she would notice, oh, there's my health anxiety again. How interesting that my mind goes straight to the worst possible scenario when I feel any physical sensation. I see you. Anxiety. I know you're trying to keep me safe. But right now, in this moment, I'm actually okay. This gentle approach worked far better than all her previous attempts to stop the anxious thoughts. By acknowledging them with kindness instead of fighting them, they gradually lost their intensity and frequency. She wasn't dismissing her concerns entirely. If she had genuine symptoms, she would still see a doctor, but she stopped letting every minor physical sensation send her into a panic spiral. The third practice is the daily reset. Every morning, before you get out of bed, before you check your phone, before you dive into the day's activities, take 30 seconds to remind yourself, I am not my thoughts today. I am the awareness that observes them. Today I will practice being the sky, not the weather. And every evening, before you go to sleep, spend 2 minutes reflecting on your day. Not judging yourself, not making a list of what you did wrong, but simply acknowledging moments when you caught yourself being the observer instead of the victim. I noticed when I started spiraling about that work presentation, and I paused. I caught myself getting lost in that old story about not being good enough, and I stepped back. I felt anxiety about money, and instead of getting consumed by it, I watched it like a cloud passing by. Celebrate these victories, no matter how small they seem. Each moment of awareness is like a ray of sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The more you notice these moments, the more they begin to multiply. You're building a new muscle here, the muscle of awareness. And like any muscle in your body, it gets stronger with practice. At first, you might only remember to pause once a day. That's not just okay, that's perfect. Progress, not perfection. Then maybe twice. Then maybe you catch yourself in the middle of a mental storm and remember to step back and observe. Then maybe you start noticing thoughts as they arise, instead of after you've been carried away by them for 20 minutes. Each time, you're claiming a little more of your freedom.